Good day to you all. This is The Colour Cave. I'm Jem and I like to play with art stuff. We are returning to our Colouring for Beginners series, and today we are going to talk about blending. It seems to be the one thing that people most fear when they learn to use pencils and start to colour, and I want to put all those fears to rest today and show you a nice simple basic way to get smooth blends and really create something beautiful for your pictures. So grab your pencils, let's go. Alright everybody. What I am going to do is demonstrate first of all, if you want to blend colours that are the same shade. So for example, a dark green and a light green. Now for the purposes of this demonstration, I have PC 908, which is Prismacolor dark green, and I also have PC 912, which is apple green. It's looking a little bit diddly. So this is really the first instance where you would want to try blending if you've never done it before. Sticking to colours in the same colour group is a really good place to start. I have picked green on purpose because I do know that a lot of you like to colour foliage and flowers and plants and all that kind of jazz, so I thought this would be a really good place to start. Alright then, before you start even trying to conform to any sort of shape in a colouring book, it's a really good idea to practice just on a scrap piece of paper like I've got here. Please ignore this, this is from another video. Yeah, what we want to do is we want to practice in a nice open space so that we don't have the confinement of line art while we're trying to learn. There are several ways to blend, and I'm not saying that there's a particular right way or a particular wrong way. This is just the way that I learned to do it and how I do it. Please take the time to go and watch other YouTube videos because there are different methods of doing it. I just found the simplest way that worked for me, and I'd love to share that with everyone. If it helps anybody along, that is fab. I am going to start with my darkest pencil. I don't always start with my darkest pencil. However, for the ease of doing this, that's what we're going to do. Now the best thing to do is decide on your space. So I'm going to start working up here, and to begin with, using quite a light hand, I'm just going to go back and forth. Now I'm most comfortable working up and down. Some people are more comfortable going across the way. I find up and down easier. Now this is just for the practice stages, obviously. So I'm just building up a wee block of colour there, and then what I'm doing is I'm going back over and I am creating that one pencil gradient that we've talked about twice now in some of our other videos, and I'm starting to darken it down with a bit of heavier pressure at the left hand side and gradually lighten it up. Okay, now give yourself plenty of room, make it nice and wide because this is how you're going to practice. So a nice heavy pressure on this side, and I'm just lightening it up, and I am giving myself lots of room here. I'm making this really long, and it's to give myself plenty of room to try and blend in that other colour. So if I start with that, it's pretty rough, but this is the beauty of what we're doing. I really shouldn't hand gesture when we're zoomed in like this. Oh dear. Okay, so now we've got my little dinky apple green. Can you tell that I like green? It's one of my favourite colours. Now all I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the same again with this pencil as I did with the darker colour, but I'm going to start about here, and the first layer is very, very light, and I'm just working my way across what I've already coloured, and I'm going to go that little bit further. Okay? Now already you can see that there is a gradient transition, and all I've done is put one tiny little light layer on top of that dark green. Can you see it in this section here, from about here to here? Okay, so I'm going to go back over and I'm going to start in this sort of quite heavily saturated area, and I'm going to press a little bit harder. And again, just as I was doing before, up and down, back and forth, and keep going and bring it into this lighter space where there's no dark green at all. Okay, so you can see that it's starting to take shape now. Now at this point you have the basic transition from the dark to the light colour, and it's just a case of going back and working over it to make it nice and smooth and even. As you can see, I have quite a lot of white space, and this is the tooth of the paper showing through, and I want to be able to get rid of as much of that as possible so that it is nice and smooth from the dark to the light. So I'm just going to keep working away here. Now I'm not doing anything else that I haven't already done. Medium pressure, and I'm just going back over what I've done. And what I'm doing now is I'm building up the light green colour so that it is, it's not fading into, you know, insignificance beside the dark green, which is why I wanted a few layers down on top of one another. And I'm working my way back into that dark green, again just to help smooth it out. Okay, now this is the point where I step back and look, and I've decided that my dark green needs to be darker at this side, so again just a medium layer is absolutely fine. Medium pressure, sorry, not a medium layer. And as I come into my light green, I'm releasing that pressure and just letting it fade in really gently into the pale green. Now a lot of people, when they're happy with their gradient, if I zoom out, now that it doesn't look great admittedly when you're this close, but if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that that doesn't look like too bad a blend. Now the way to finish this off is to go back over the whole gradient with your lightest pencil. Now in this case obviously we're starting with 2 pencils, so it is going to be this apple green. And what I'm doing here is I'm pressing quite hard this time, and you can see the pigment really coming out, but I am going to go all the way across into the dark green. And this just helps smooth the colour out and really sort of squish the colours together. There you go, and that is a very basic blend. And all it does is takes a little practice to get familiar with this before you can start moving on to working in confined spaces. So that's a really good place to start. Now moving on from using similar colours, we're talking more about a blending of and a gradient here. The most common and the easiest pencils to blend together are red, yellow and orange. And this, don't panic because it's 3 pencils, we're not really doing anything different, but we're just transitioning from one colour to another. And again, start with your darkest colour. I have here Scarlet Lake PC923, and all I'm going to do is start exactly as I did before, and just a sort of medium pressure, and I'm going to fade it out. Now obviously because I'm using 3 colours here, the length from here to here of each colour I want to make a bit shorter, otherwise I'm going to end up going off the page and off the screen. And I have an orange pencil now. My orange pencil is actually yellowed orange and it's PC1002. This is one of the old Prismacolor pencils before the factory was moved to Mexico. I have had this pencil for years and I have never had any breakage problems with it. There you go, there's a controversial point for you, because I know you know about the Prismacolors and the breakage situation. This is bulletproof, this pencil, and I wish I still had more of my older ones. Anyway, so I've gone from a sort of medium pressure into a lighter pressure here, and I'm going to do the same with the orange and do that slight overlap. So I'm going to start about the middle of the red, and I'm just going to work that. Now this is really just for colour placement, you know, when you're planning where you want your blend and your gradient to be, you know, within a picture, it's quite important to know roughly where the transition should be. Now lastly I have a yellow here, and we are my old favourite canary yellow. And again I'm going to start halfway through the orange and just pull that out so that it's on its own, so to speak. From doing that simple exercise there, I now have the transitional areas between the colours. You can see the transitional area here where the orange is overlapping with the red, and it's a bit harder to see with the yellow just in the light there, but you can see it here. This is the transitional area between the paler yellow and the yellowed orange. So now this is where we start to work in and work at it and build up the colour. So I'm going to get my heavy pressure right down here at the start with my red and just lighten it up very gradually, and as I come into that orange transition I'm going to tail off, and then I'm going to do the same with my yellowed orange, and I'm going to start in the edge of this dark part here, and I'm going to press quite firmly, and I'm going through that transitional patch, and then I'm going to start to release my pressure about here and tail it off, and then I'm going to start heavy pressure yellow here, You can see there the area where I need to work on is this middle section with the orange. The red and the orange are working quite well together, but the yellowed orange and the canary yellow are not. Back to my yellowed orange, and this is how blending works. You have to work at it. You don't just put down a layer of one colour and that's you're good to go. That is not the way blending works. Now that we have tried with our greens, let's put that into some sort of context. And I'm just going to draw a very basic leaf shape here. So this is our leaf. To put it into context, it's similar to starting with the one pencil shading. You have to decide where you want things to be light and dark before you start. If you try and do it as you go, you're going to end up in a big old mess. So what I am going to do here is I'm going to map out the colour just with a very light layer of the light and the dark pencil so that I can decide where I want the light parts to be and where I want the dark parts to be. So again, in the interest of keeping things simple, I think I would like the top half to be the paler green. So and that is, I mean, I'm barely touching the paper and I know that you can't see that, and that's a good thing. I can just see it with the naked eye. Okay, so now I'm going to just put a very faint layer of the darker colour down on the bottom. And I'm hardly letting them touch, like just and no more. You can see better now that I have lightly put down a layer of each. Now what I'm going to do is go back to the technique that I've just showed you, and I'm going to start really heavily down here. And I am going to work my way up the stem, making that really dark because I'm not going to be doing any blending there. And I'm going to work my way up. Now again, I'm getting lighter as I go up, just trying to keep my pressure as light as possible when I get close to the edges of my leaf, until I'm actually at the stage I'm almost meeting this pale green that I've put down, and I am hardly touching the paper at all. If I was to lift off any more pressure, the pencil would not be on the paper. Same as before, just a light layer in that sort of transitional area in the dark part of the leaf, and I'm going to work my way up. So that's, the colours are technically joined up now, they're touching now. There we go. And I can start to work on my darker patches now. Now that I know where that transition area is, I'm going to go back here and I'm pressing quite hard. And again, just the same as before, I'm lightening up my pressure as I go. Yeah, so I'm just medium pressure, and I'm really sort of trying to blend these colours together now. Now obviously I am using Prismacolor pencils, and they are incredibly soft, so they are perfect for demonstrating this here. Now you can do it with any pencil. I started with Crayola pencils many years ago. I learned to blend with them. I don't want to hear any excuses saying, oh, I can't blend because I've got really hard tipped pencils. I learned with Crayolas, you'll be fine. Okay, so you can see there that's starting to look a bit more like a blend. It's still a bit patchy for my liking, and this is where I go back and forth, and it is one of the things that makes me a slow colourist. There are more efficient ways of blending two colours together than the way that I do it, but I am quite particular, and I do like to walk away from things and go back later on and just tweak things, and you know, I have trouble leaving things alone sometimes. So a really, really light touch up here now. You can hardly see that green. The dark green, I mean. That green, they're both green. You can hardly see the dark green, but I know it's there. Alright, so that's the general idea. That looks lovely now. We don't have any sort of harsh divisions between the dark and the light. So that's really, really good. If you want to take it a step further, I shall draw another leaf, find my pen. If you wanted to take it a step further, if we think back to our light sources, Now naturally you could say that with this leaf that the light source is coming from above, and that's why the top part of the leaf is lighter than the bottom part. However, if you want to go that step further, we can do exactly the same thing again, but we can leave a highlighted spot in either the very, very pale green or leave it white. I'll show you what I mean. Map out my colours as before, because I'm going to do a blend. I want to know roughly where you know, that transitional area is going to be for this particular leaf. So just a really light coat. My really pale green. Now I'm going to make a highlighted spot here. So the light's coming from over here. So I am deliberately leaving a tiny, tiny spot of that leaf white. Now I'm just going to do exactly as I did before with the other one. Nice and hard pressure down here, because that's just where their little stalk. And then I'm going to start working on here, and just a medium pressure, and getting lighter as I head towards my paler area that I've mapped out. Nice and gentle. Now here I am in that transitional area with the lighter green now. Just working that in. Again, very, very steady hand, medium pressure. And as I get towards the white area, I'm really letting up on the pencil. Like, I'm back to hardly touching the paper. There we go. So we can work away like this, just as we did before. Now all we're doing is building up the layers, and that's just to help build up the pigment on the paper and give it that sort of vibrancy that you want. Because the last thing you want is a really washed out looking illustration or drawing. So it's important that if you are using a light hand, that you take the time to build up a few layers, and that's just going to give you a really nice depth of colour. There we are, and I'm starting to use a bit heavier pressure with my apple green now. And just working my way around and smoothing in, making sure that when I come close to my highlighted area that I'm letting up the pressure. I am still putting colour to paper, but it is just very, very, very slight. The other hint for doing something like this is leave the white area bigger than you think you need it. Now the reason for that is if you go in too far with your coloured pencil, you can't take it back. Whereas if you leave it bigger and you decide that the highlighted area is taking up too much of the leaf, you can always colour some of it in and make it smaller. So that is my advice to you if you do decide you want to put in a highlight like that. There we go. So I'm just evening out the colour now. I'm reasonably happy with how this is blending together. Alright, so there you are, your fancy pants without even trying. Not only do you have a blend, but you have a highlight as well. If we go back to the green that we've started with, I would like to show you now my colourless blender. It is the Prismacolor one, and I use this blender pencil with all of my pencil brands, not just the Prismacolors, because it seems to behave quite well with all the different types of pencils. I don't use a colourless blender a lot, however, it can be particularly helpful. If you have a particularly toothy paper and you've coloured in and you can still see lots of white spots, then this can help you push the pigment into the paper and give you a smoother finish. Some people use them all the time, some people not so much. I quite like a bit of texture in my drawings, so I'm not too bothered, but it does give you quite a nice finish. The paper that I'm working on here is sketch paper, so it does have a reasonable tooth to it, and I'm sure you can see, I don't need to zoom in any further, but you can see that there are white spaces in amongst all this. With this pencil, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start in my lightest colour. Now you always want to start in your lightest colour, because if you start at the darkest point, you're going to drag the dark colour over into the light, and it can muddy things up sometimes and not look so great. So start in your lightest colour, and using a really heavy pressure, like absolutely press as hard as you can. Now just a point to add here, don't use your colourless blender until you're absolutely sure that you're finished laying down colour, because once you do this, you've mashed the tooth of the paper flat and you're not going to be able to get any more coloured pencil on. So make sure you're finished with your colours first and you're happy, then get your blender pencil. And all we're going to do is press really, really hard, and we're going to move in little circular motions all the way across every single piece of this that we've coloured in. And you can see that all my lines, especially in this transitional area, that all my lines are starting to disappear, and the white of the paper is also disappearing too. Now what I have found with blender pencils is that they do tend to lighten up your colours. There we go. You can see particularly in this middle bit, that transitional area has really smoothed out, really, really nice. So I'm just going to give it another little going over. That is much smoother, and there's much less white of the tooth of the paper showing through. So that is another handy tool to have, and it does help smooth your transitions as well. If you feel they're a bit blocky, you can use a blender pencil to sort them out. I just wanted to be able to give you a demonstration in a more practical sense. So here I have my copy of Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, and I am going to do some blending with this flower down here. Now one of the most common colour combinations for blending, if you are not using pencils from the same family, so as in you're not using two greens, or you're not using two blues, or you're not using two yellows. One of the easiest to learn to use is a combination of red, orange and yellow. Now I'm working in quite a small space here, but I'm going to show you that it can be done, and it's a case of practicing. That really, when it comes to blending, you need to practice before you start going into one of your precious books. What I'm going to do is, as I did with my leaf earlier on, I am going to map out where my colours are and where I want those transitions. So I'm going to have yellow in the middle, so I want just maybe a very small section of yellow, because I say we are working in quite a confined space here. Now I'm not going to do each petal individually because there's just no need for that. So lightest pressure that I can possibly muster. And this is really, this mapping of the colours, it helps me to decide whether or not it's going to look good. See, if I'm not sure but I maybe want to try something, this is really, really helpful. And especially when you come to blending and gradients like this, you know, sometimes you're maybe not so sure and you think to yourself, is this a good idea? Okay, so now I'm using my red and I'm just very, very lightly. Now don't worry if you can see here that you can actually see the pencil marks. They are like scribbles, but you're going to be putting so many layers on that those are going to disappear really quickly. So don't panic about this first coat being sketchy, because that's exactly what it should be. It's you're sketching out, you're planning out where your colours are going to go. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that, I think. So what I'm doing now is I'm using my darkest colour. So this is Scarlet Lake PC923, and I'm just going to start. Now that's just a medium pressure, but you can see it's quite vibrant, and I'm just going to work my way right round the edge of my little flower, like this. Oh no, I went outside the lines. Already I'm getting an idea, seeing the red the way that it is, I'm getting an idea of what it's going to look like in contrast with the yellow right in at the centre, and I think it's going to stand out really, really nicely. It's just going to pop, which is just exactly what we want. Alright, so that's my sort of starting point, and again exactly the same as before. If you want to take it petal by petal, if you think that's easier, then by all means please be my guest. Now I'm just lightening up as I go here, say exactly the same as before. So I'm starting dark where I've already put the outline, and then I'm really bringing up my pressure, my pencil. And I'm just going to work my way around. I'm trying to do this so that you can still see. I'll bend my wrist about a wee bit. There we go. That's okay. That's quite comfortable. Now when you go in a circle like this, it does actually make it a little bit easier because you can look back and you can see how even, you know, how thick of a band of colour you're putting down all the way around. So that I find that that's something that's quite helpful. If the petals were bigger, I would work on them individually, but because they are quite small and they're quite sort of squashed together, I find it just as easy to work my way around like this, you know, by colour rather than by petal. Just in the silence there, I can hear the wind picking up outside. It is very, very cold here in Scotland today, and we are due another dump of snow at approximately 3 p.m. this afternoon, and I think that it's not that far off. I sneaked out really early this morning for a run because I knew the weather was going to be terrible. Anyway, right, so there we go. That's quite even. That's not bad. Next colour down is my PC 1002, which is yellowed orange. So I'm starting in my transitional area, medium pressure. Again, I'm just lightening up as I go as I head towards that tiny little yellow section in the middle. And I'm just going to do that all the way around. Now, if you have a light enough hand here, then you are able to step back and see if your pressure is even all the way around. It's because when you're working in a circle, it's not the most comfortable way of doing things. I appreciate that. If you're working in a straight line, it is much easier. But it's nice because you have that symmetry and you can see where you need to, you know, go and lay down some more pencil to get it all nice and even. All right. Now you should hopefully be starting to see the colour coming up a bit more on the camera. I am always aware when using especially colours like yellow that they don't show up particularly well on the camera. There we go. So I'm just putting in my yellow, again medium pressure there, and bringing it out to meet the orange. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now at this stage, the orange to me is very, very pale and very washed out, so I'm going to start down in here in my red area and just exactly the same as before, and I'm going individually petal by petal here because I feel that I need to be able to do this all the way around, and I really need to be working in the red area, and because it protrudes out further, you know, because of the curve of the petal, it's just easier to go, wrong one, to go petal by petal. So that is what we're going to do. Make sure I'm lightening up as I hit the yellow though, because I don't want you know, a very obvious line between the yellow and the orange. The whole point of this is that they're meshing well together and you're making it look nice and seamless. There we go. That's come out a really fiery colour. That's really nice. I'm going to have to save this colour combination and use it again. I really like this one. Okay, dokie, that is looking a bit more like it. Now my only complaint now is I'm quite happy with the blending, but I just don't feel as if there's enough red. I feel as if it's been kind of shoved out by the orange, so I'm just going to go back round and again dark at the edge and lightening my pressure in towards the centre, and it's just really to balance it out because I just, as I say, I feel there's just too much orange and there's not enough of the red to really give that nice contrast, so I'm just going in and darkening that down a bit just to balance things out a little bit. Because my red does look quite orangey. I don't know if it does on camera, but it does here. That kind of defeats the purpose if it looks orangey. It's supposed to be red into orange. Now as I'm going round here, I'm actually looking up here, although I'm colouring down here. And it's to try and make sure again that I'm keeping things nice and even. There we go, nearly finished now. Now this has made me want to go back. See what I mean? This is what I was talking about earlier. This is how I always end up faffing about for ages with blending. I'm like, oh, I could just go over that again. Again, I'm just really, all I want to do here is kind of smooth it out a little bit. That's all I'm trying to achieve. It's not any particular secret, but I just want it a little bit smoother, that's all. And I've got this corner down here. I'm just gonna blend a wee bit more with my yellow. Now I'm pressing quite hard with the yellow here, just to finish that off. Alright, so there you go then. So you can see without too much trouble that you can achieve a little bit of blending, and it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out. But what I will say is practice, practice, practice. Use plain sheets of paper like I showed you at the beginning of the video and practice. Draw squares, draw circles, draw funny shapes, and experiment with the different placing of the colours and get yourself really familiar with it before you start working in one of your books. And after that, then you can go ahead and have a go and put in some lovely detail in your pictures. I hope this has been useful in some way, shape or form to some of you. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye guys.